This podcast is sponsored by Communicate and Connect Counseling, where we have a team of therapists who provide individual, couples, and family therapy services, all tailored to meet the needs of military and veteran families. To learn more about our services, visit www.communicateandconnect.com. You're listening to episode 48, Attachment Theory and Spirituality, with Dr. Bill Senyard. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Communicate and Connect podcast. I'm really excited because today we have Dr. Bill Senyard to talk about attachment theory and spirituality. So not only is he a doctor, but he's also a pastor. And I think this is going to be really helpful, especially because oftentimes faith is such an important part of a couple's journey. And there are a lot of couples who are faith-based. So I'm glad you can add this in. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your experiences and how you got into attachment.
Yeah, so I've been a pastor for 25 years. I actually been doing my own thing, the Gospel Lab, for 7 years after that. And my passion is really to help people, frustrated and weary and beat up people, actually feel better about themselves. And in my particular case, my leaning would be to make it faith-based in their relationship with God. But there's principles from neuroscience and attachment theory that are universal, and we could be taking advantage of them. So I'm trying to get those out on podcasts like this.
Yeah, great. How did you get into attachment theory? Because obviously I love it, but it's foundational to the field of marriage and family therapy. I don't think I've really heard many pastors talk about theory that's separate from, I guess, theology.
Yeah. I don't tend to separate them as much as most do. So that's an interesting statement. I mean, I think you're right. I think your observations are right. For me, it was just necessity. I was, after seminary, I was 35, and I was thrown into a church plant that we started in a very, very non-Christian area of southwestern Canada by Vancouver. And the people that started coming were very needy. They were a lot of rape victims, attempted murder victims. We had oh my gosh, it was in some ways a sitcom, and I had to come to grips with things that I had not dealt with, and I would say just straight up, I'm shame prone, and I've been to lots of counseling. I could tell you why, for the most part, but I wasn't able to relate that to myself, to my theology, to my identity. I was just, in attachment theory terms, avoidant. And I was sitting in counseling at seminary at the very end of my seminary experience with a spiritual formation professor. And right then and there, I mean, if I had say it, I mean, I had this spiritual moment where my life passed before my eyes, and I realized that I had been destroying relationship after relationship after relationship because of avoidance. And what I realized there in that moment was not just that God loved me. I experienced that 15 years earlier when I became a Christian, but that this maybe sounds strange, but I actually got that he liked me. And I had been in relationship with him, a Christian, for 15 years and didn't believe that. I mean, I thought I did, but I clearly didn't. And I fell into depression, and Dr. Houston kind of worked with me on the way out. And I had to really come to grips with a lot of things, and neuroscience, attachment theory, and the gospel, all three kind of worked together to help me out. So for me, it was, I was in trouble.
Yeah, and such a personal journey too. I think all of us who end up in a helping profession of some kind often have our own journeys, as does everybody. But what I'm really hearing is through my own journey and realizing that my own attachment style and how that played out, not only in my relationships, but also my relationship with God.
Yeah.
That was kind of the starting point for your passion around attachment.
Well, I mean, if I in attachment theory, I was avoidant, which means I'm doing pretty well on my own, and I'd rather not have other people's problems, and I'm called to be a pastor.
Yes, very hard to not have other people's problems as a pastor. So I could see the conflict there.
Bit of a
Yeah.
conflict.
So let's do a refresher
Yeah.
on attachment. So how do you typically explain attachment theory
Yeah.
to people you work with?
Yeah, attachment theory always begins in infancy. The work that was done early on by Bowlby and such is that infants between the third trimester of pregnancy and year 2, their brains developing, and however they are treated is the nature issue, not the nurture. I mean, the nurture issue versus nature issue. However they're treated, they develop to one degree or another inner working models that affect their ability to self-regulate, to form relationships, to hold on relationships, for the rest of their lives to some degree or another. And so if they end up after the 2-year period of infancy, remember, they're not even thinking at this point. It's not like they can shape a thought. But if there's enough attunement between their primary caregiver, typically a mother, but not necessarily, could be any caregiver. But if there's this intimate attunement between the baby and the caregiver, according to attachment theory, 30% of the instances are interactions, so 3 out of 10. And by attunement, I mean those intimate interactions where there's parallel neurons happening, where there's mirror neurons happening, where there's dopamine going and oxytocin going, and there's a strong connection, and the child feels like there's someone there for them, they will enter the next period, the stage of life, being secure. And secure means that they're willing to explore the world. They think that the world's kind a little bit. They think that they can trust adults more, and they tend to be happier. They tend to do better in school. They tend to be more socially energized. If they are not secure, here's a study that was done. I think I'm quoting Gabor Mate, I think. But anyway, infants who are insecure even by 2 years old, when they become adults, they have difficulty understanding their own emotions and feelings of others, so they lack empathy a little or a lot, right? Not perfectly. They have limited ability to maintain stable relationships. They struggle to emotionally regulate. Meaning when they blow up, they have a hard time tuning down on their own. They may subconsciously shy away from intimacy or erupt. They may be too clingy or anxious. They may, and they definitely tend to be more addictive as adults. So attachment theory just discovered that important segment of time was very influential for children. Now our brains have plasticity, so we can change that. We can lean into it throughout our entire lives, particularly during adolescence. And that's a lot of my work right now, is working with parents of teens and tweens, because during adolescence, the brain's happening again, and the neurons are being pruned, and we really are learning that we have a shot to help our children become more secure as they enter adulthood. So basically, that's attachment theory in a nutshell.
Yeah, I like that. There's just so much that goes into it. Like you're talking about like all the neurons that are firing, also what it means to be attuned to somebody. You had mentioned like internal working models, which with my clients, I often talk about it as like a template. It's the template that my brain gets and learns to have about, can I trust people? Will they be there for me?
That's
Do
right.
I have value? Which then goes on to impact how I feel about myself, how I feel about other people, and how I interact and behave, which is that emotion regulation piece.
Yeah, attachment theorists say that there's 2 subconscious questions that we're all asking. Infants, even though we can't vocalize it, there's 2 questions. In infancy, it's really kind of one. It's, are you there for me? So an infant that's crying in their crib, they're crying and crying and crying. They could be wet, they could be hungry, it could be pain, they could be afraid, they could be lonely. We don't know. But what their brain is saying, is there anybody out there? And can anybody can regulate these emotions? When we become adults, when we become adolescents and adults and teens, they break up into 2 questions. And these are the ones that I work with, adults in particular, and teens. The first one is, can I count on you? Is there somebody out there that actually has my back? If not, I've got some approaches that I'm going to take if I'm anxious or avoidant, and we can talk about that. But can I count on you? Is there someone there, even when I mess up, when I screw up, when I get caught, when I have a breakup, when I in your case, in the case of your clients, come back from deployment and there's that awkwardness or breakdowns. Is there somebody or something I can count on? The second one is actually, am I worthy of anybody's love? Is there anybody who just loves me as I am, or in my faith experience, likes me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to tie it back to your experience. Absolutely. And so these fundamental questions, what I hear you saying is that even infants have this fundamental question, is somebody there for me? And the way that they internalize the answer to that then goes on to develop either kind of in a way like their personality, but in this case, calling it an attachment style of either secure or insecure, with feeling like I can count on somebody. That's the message that I learned in my infancy up till 2 years, that I could count on people. That helps me feel secure. But if I got the message I couldn't count on somebody, then that would lead to an insecure style.
It's hardwired to some degree or another. It can be changed, but it takes intentionality and work. And EFT that you've been dealing into, that's the jam of EFT, right? Is to work on those things. That is the jam.
Yes, yeah, to help couples develop a secure attachment between the two of them. Yeah, that's exactly what we do in EFT couple therapy. So,
that's right.
Do you want to talk at all about you don't have to, but the attachment styles? Because I know you describe that a lot to the people you work with.
Yeah.
So especially the insecure ones.
Oh, yeah. So there's really 4 quadrants in the attachment theory. The secure one, let me tell you what a secure person looks like and feels like. And that would be 40% of the population. That would be middle to upper class, majority population. It would be 60% of that, 40% of those who live in more urban environments who are under stress. Maybe some of your clients who are on the who are deployed. But anyway, the secure individual, their identity cup is pretty full. They can focus on the needs of others. They can be more empathetic. This person is great in counseling because they get it. I mean, they're glad to be there. They've developed an ability to emotionally self-regulate. So when they get angry, everybody does, they can cool down quickly without blaming. They can make adjustments relationally on the fly. They're good with differences, relational complexity. They're comfortable expressing their own needs and wants. Again, they're great in counseling. And they work hard to repair relationships because relationships have been good for them. One of the insecure quadrants is anxious. And the anxious person, here's how someone put it, being in a relationship with someone who is acting out an anxious attachment style can feel like dealing with an angry customer while staffing a support complaint desk. So they still need others to emotionally regulate. For whatever reason, their caregivers and parents didn't instill that ability. They didn't help them enough that they picked it up. So they actually use other people in their relationship to emotionally regulate. They worry about being abandoned, dismissed, overlooked, betrayed, fear of missing out. That's this category. They externalize. They blame others readily. I mean, you can probably picture some of your clients. They tend towards perfectionism. So this would be the person who works really hard to achieve, maybe a person who's in the SEALs or the special forces, because they feel like if they rise up, they will be noticed. And so they're not doing it for healthy reasons. They're doing it to emotionally regulate.
I've also heard like a lot of my clients where there is someone who had a more anxious attachment style that developed from their childhood, like a strong desire to be good enough, because on the inside, I'm thinking someone's not going to be there for me unless I'm good enough.
Exactly right.
And so working really hard.
That's right. They love the attagirls and attaboys. They need credit. They will always try to get credit in a situation at the extreme. They're quick to share unfiltered emotions, but it's usually anger or depression, rarely joy. They're high maintenance, but they're considered high maintenance by their partners, by their soulmates, by their friends or spouses, because they keep bringing this stuff up. And when the fear cycle kicks in, it's usually fear. The avoidance, that's me. We fear connectedness. Connectedness is there anybody there for me? And I don't know that I'm afraid of it, but I've come to see over the years that I am, because nothing has hurt me more than relationships. Nothing has let me down more than relationships. It's in my inner working model, right? We can be self-reliant, which I am. I can be stressed out by relationship issues of others. So if I have an anxious partner, I'm just going to be really tired in counseling if they keep bringing this stuff up. I just want to move on. Problem? What problem? We've dealt with that. We can have a highly sensitive radar for feeling like we're being manipulated or used or blamed. We're filtered emotionally. I am so tired of counselors asking me, where do I feel that stress? Liz, I've eventually just made something up just to get, because I don't feel that in my body. I'm just saying. So I just say my shoulders, and they go, oh, yeah. So we move on. I'm avoidant.
Yes. That is a key feature of somebody who does have an avoidant attachment style, is to be very disconnected from the emotional
very
feelings,
disconnected, a little strong.
Yeah, but that is something that is learned. And so, like, actually in EFT couple therapy,
oh my goodness,
we help people get reconnected with those emotions.
Believe me, I've been through EFT and needed it. Oh my gosh, of course. I'm a big Susan Johnson fan.
Awesome. Love that.
So, and we could be, I'm here, passive aggressive, but that, I don't think so. So those are the categories. So when you get an avoidant, so for instance, every rom-com that has ever been produced by Hollywood is an avoidant and an anxious personalities. The anxious are playing games, and the avoidant just can't make a decision and move forward until they finally do. In the meantime, the anxious person is trying to make the other person jealous and all the other things, right? That's a rom-com theme, but it's played out in most living rooms in the country.
Yeah, it's I suppose so. We do know from research that oftentimes couples and an anxiously attached person will partner with an avoidantly attached person.
Yeah.
But I will say that movies sometimes are like on steroids. They're a little extreme.
I should introduce you to my friends. No, that's true. Yeah, they exaggerate to make a point. That's exactly true.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon to have an anxious personality, extreme anxious personality, have an affair, and subconsciously, and the avoidant spouse is sitting back there going, "Why did they do that?" And the avoidant spouse is going, "See, that's why I'm closed up. That's why I can't share with this person." And the anxious spouse is going, "Why can't that person open up to me and love me?" And if you can sit down with them as a counselor and say, so which of these questions did you try to answer? Is there somebody there for me, or is there anybody there who actually loves me? And if you can help them identify which one is which, you can quickly identify which one's avoidant and which one's anxious, and give them something to talk about.
That is a really good example of when the affair is done, like it's the anxious person who went outside of the relationship. Avoidant attachment styles can have affairs also, but for them, it's more about, do you see me as good enough?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I just don't want anyone listening to be like, oh, you must be anxious because you cheated, or worried now that if they're partnered with someone who's anxious, that means they're going to cheat, because it can happen with either style. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, two avoidants could their relationship could dissolve very easily and quickly over time. Yeah. Totally right.
So we've covered kind of like the background of what attachment theory is really about, this kind of like personality development in early childhood and the different styles that develop, and how those relate to those two core questions that people are asking. So help us like connect the dots for me on attachment theory and spirituality, and how you you see
Yeah.
them like going together?
Yeah. So the answer to spirituality, effective, good spirituality would be talking about this relationship that one has with God, in my case,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. And in that relationship, those two questions are answered positively and experientially so. So for me, I have learned that I have one relationship where I can actually say there is somebody there for me. I've experienced him. I've experienced him when I've messed up. I've experienced him when I needed somebody. There's somebody out there who actually loves me. The theologian John Calvin, he's not known for this, he should be, but he says that the Holy Spirit, the secret workings, it sounds like a spy novel, but the secret workings of the Holy Spirit within the inner being of a Christian is to make Christians feel that love of God, that twofold love of God, because we're in the same world that everybody else is, and we get beat up the same way. And our inner working models, and or to put it differently, our critical inner voice says you're not lovable. There's nobody there for you. You've screwed up. You're ugly. You're overweight. You're old. You've screwed up that relationship. You should have said that. You should have, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I have faith-based people really do have one relationship they can lean on. And the idea is, if we can get our emptied cups, our leaky cups filled a little bit with enoughness and connectedness that comes from that, we can actually overflow into other relationships. We can be more secure.
I'm following. And so I don't remember if I mentioned this already, but I don't have a faith base myself. Yeah. And so
you seem okay anyway, though.
Well, thank you. Thank you, I guess. It's just I don't even try to dip into that world. I'd much rather have people who are trained, who have a faith base to guide people, on that. And so what I'm hearing is that the relationship with God is also an attachment relationship, where on the inside I can develop a sense of security, an internal knowing that someone's there for me, aka God, and that I'm valuable, that I'm lovable, that I'm liked.
Nice, lovable. Yeah. Okay. That's exactly right. And it's in an attunement sense. I mean, I talk about spiritual attunement. I can actually begin to learn how to rely on God to help me emotionally self-regulate.
Okay. So from that security in the relationship with God, that actually helps calm overwhelming emotions. Following the theory would actually help change my internal self-critic, would help me modify how I'm interacting in relationships. So from that secure bond with God, that can overflow into the other relationships.
He's imagined him to us as our parent. Yeah. So that would be a good enough parent, one who actually attunes with me. So and I've experienced that, and it has worked for me. Now, for somebody who doesn't have that relationship, I have a quote from Yuri Bronfenbrenner, a pretty well-known child psychologist. I think this is fantastic, and it says the same thing, but just in a non-faith-based way. Every child, and this would include adults too, so I'll say it, every adult needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her.
That's so sweet.
Isn't that great?
I like that. Yeah.
And the idea is, I don't just need it once. I actually need that repeated to me over and over and over. So I'm reaching my midbrain in neuroscience. I'm not reaching my prefrontal cortex. I'm reaching my midbrain, which think addiction. I need to form a new addiction. So I need somebody, if I'm insecure, anxious, or adult, or fearful, that last category we didn't talk about. But if I'm any of those, I need someone, a real person, who can regularly be that adult who's irrationally crazy about me, and they verbalize it. They physically show me that they're there with me, particularly in the bad times. They're not judging me. They're not critical. And from a brain science perspective, I need that 3 out of 10 interactions during the day. So ideally, that's a spouse. But sometimes relationships are so fragmented and fractured, that's hard to come by. So, but we need that relationship somehow, or else the inner working models will just become critical critical suggestions over and over and over.
Yeah, I'm following. I'm still kind of like reeling from that quote. It's like I like teared up even.
I know it's a gem. I know.
Yeah. Okay. So
Good thing to ask your clients, is there anybody, and I mean, who is it in your life is irrationally crazy? And I, from a pastoral perspective and working with people
mhm,
in pastoral counseling, I would tell you that a lot of people would say, I just don't have that person anymore, or maybe I never did.
mhm.
It's
And
it's
so
uh it's sad.
it is. Yeah, it absolutely is. I think from like an EFT marriage counseling
Yep.
perspective, that is what we're creating in marriages.
Oh,
But
yes, it is. That's right.
yeah, but from the pastoral I guess perspective, that's what you are working to create in the relationship with God. Okay.
Yeah, I try to be that for people that I'm working with.
Hmm.
Yeah, do
Okay.
do the best I can. But I'm avoidant, remember.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, ultimately, they're not forming an attachment with you. They're trying to form an attachment with God. Yeah.
Not so clear all
So,
the time.
yes, I believe that. Yeah, I believe that.
uh,
That you would sometimes stand in and be seen as a proxy for God in that way.
that's been one of the major failings of churches is one person gets in that position and they don't, how can I put this? They don't let God be God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That this goes into a whole different conversation that would
It
be much
does.
longer
It
around like
is.
power
It is.
dynamics and things like that. But
Exactly right.
yeah.
Exactly right.
So when you think about, we'll go back to God, attachment and spirituality. We'll avoid that
Well,
conversation.
let's do that.
Yeah. When you think about how thinking about attachment also as a spiritual endeavor,
Yeah.
and in some ways, okay, so I had, how do I say this? I had a couple that I was really close to when I was
Yeah.
growing up, and
Okay.
they were faith-based.
Mm-hmm.
And they would talk about this book, which, goodness, I don't think I can remember it. But one of the things that they said there, because they were sort of like the role model for a marriage for me.
Okay. Oh.
And gosh, I'm not going to be able to remember what the book was called, but they said marriage is supposed to make you wholly not happy. And I thought that was really interesting. Again, I'm not so faith-based that
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
like take that, but I do think
Mm-hmm.
that there was something in that quote that
Mm-hmm.
through my developing a secure attachment with my partner in a
Mm-hmm.
marriage, it
Mm-hmm.
is a personal growth process. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
imagining a spiritual growth process to to do the hard work to develop security with another human as an adult.
Yeah, it's hard work because we're working with subconscious inner working models that often cause me to emotionally not regulate, and so yeah, there's a lot of issues involved. It is a lot of work. I'm not sure I would totally buy that statement as the biblical model for marriage. The
Mhm.
I actually am writing. My first book was written on this old book in the Old Testament called the Song of Songs,
Mhm.
which talks about the biblical model for this relationship with God and for spouses. And it's filled with delight, it's filled with joy, it's filled with mutuality, it's filled with respect. There's zero misogyny, there's zero patriarchalism. There's this intense mutuality and desire. So yeah, and so I'm rewriting that book. Actually, that
Yeah.
was 12 years ago, and I'm rewriting and digging a little bit deeper and using some of the neuroscience and attachment theory. So I think the model is supposed to be eventually more delighting, but it does take work because we are stuck with these habits. We're stuck with addictions. We're stuck with
Hmm.
and then teens come along and everything goes out the window. So it is a lot of work. There's I think we have to do self checks. And again, if I had
Yeah.
somebody alongside of me who was irrationally crazy about me, I would probably do it all a lot better.
Yeah. So again, this is why I don't dip into these things because I'm gonna not get it right. But I guess I was thinking there is a personal growth that
Oh my
happens,
goodness. I hope so.
and like most likely a spiritual growth
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
takes place. And so,
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts for military couples who are, maybe they have different attachment styles, or
Hmm.
maybe they're newly starting out and they want to develop a secure attachment with their spouse, or
Yeah.
even just thinking about how to
Hmm.
incorporate their spirituality
Yeah.
into how they
Yeah.
go about attachment?
Yeah. So what I have done, so I want to tell you what we have online, but we
Hmm.
also have developed a prayer for individuals and couples, and this is one we did for parents, but anybody could take this. And my suggestion is it's just you're preaching the gospel to your critical inner voice. You're preaching the gospel
Mm.
to your inner working models. So it's a drip, 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 drip. It's something that I suggest people do twice a day, 3 times a day. It reflects what you just asked for, these gospel tips. So can I just read it? It's very short.
Yes. Yeah, go for it.
All right. So Jesus follower, parent guardian, strictly because of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, God actually loves you. So there we go. We're actually getting into that irrationally crazy. He loves you with all of his heart as much as the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. He can't love you any more or any less than he does right now, whether you think you're a good enough parent or not, or husband or not, or spouse enough. He loves you as you are, not as you should be or could be. You can't add to this love or take away from it. Now, I get it. It often feels like you've messed it up or need to do something so that God would like you better. Not so. How do you experience it more now? And here's the tip. Simple, good news. There is something you can do and are invited to do biblically. You can take daily baby steps to ask the Spirit inside of you to make you know, and the make you know is important, to make you know, experience and feel just how much God loves you right now. Just ask. Ask again later today, ask tomorrow, and make it a spiritual habit. You can hear the almost addiction language in there,
Hmm.
where we're relying on a higher power. So that no matter whether I'm anxious or fearful or avoidant, if I can begin to feel that one person, since it's faith-based, I have the Spirit in my inner being, Paul says in Ephesians 3. If I can feel that God is irrationally crazy about me, I am going to lean towards the secure quadrant a little bit. And it should
Hmm.
be noticeable. It should make a difference. It would be the same thing after an EFT session where one of the spouses was felt open to be emotional, and was openly emotionally vulnerable with their spouse. You know, that sense of relief and aha and the
Hmm.
connection. That's EFT, right? I mean, that's the
Yes.
thing. That's what we're shooting for spiritually. It is effective, and I have seen it. I have seen it work. I've seen it work for addicts. I've seen it work for people who've been abused, attempted murder victims. I've seen just that repetition be extremely helpful
Hmm.
for people.
So I like to repeat a lot. So bear with
Yeah,
me. And it helps me keep
you
track of
are a
everything. So
counselor. I
I
get
am a
that.
counselor. Yeah, it's ingrained in me, number one, but also it helps me keep track.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, Liz. It's a beautiful thing.
Okay, so for people who do have a faith base, they
Yeah.
can use that prayer. But the key aspect of that is that if I'm understanding I guess the
Hmm.
theology of it, is
Hmm.
that the Holy Spirit should help me feel more securely attached
Hmm.
to God,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
ask God to help me feel that.
Yeah.
And
That-
over time,
That's
that
it.
should develop from a spiritual
Preach it, girl.
perspective.
Preach it, girl.
Yeah, thanks.
The passage for people who want to look for it,
Hmm.
it's Ephesians 3, one of the letters in the New Testament, Ephesians 3, verses 14 to 21.
Okay, great. Any other tips you have, or any tips you might have for anybody who's not faith-based?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is to find a counselor or communicate to your spouse that you need that kind of affirmation on a regular basis. And so the way I actually tell parents now, and this might be suitable for,
Hmm.
and I do want to talk about the online good enough parent.
Yes, yes.
But the idea is you can blow up. We do. We will trigger. It has to do with our amygdala and the fear cycle, and we will go into fight, flight, or freeze. We just will. We can't stop it. It's impossible. If you can stop it, something's wrong. So, but the idea is when you come back, you can sit down after cortisol is worn off, which takes 3 to 5 hours, and say, what you said, what you did hurt me, but I still love you. I'm not going anywhere. I am your husband, wife. I'm your friend. I'm your father, son, whatever it might be. I am still here. We are going to work this through because I am your biggest fan. I support you. I would buy stock in you. You can hear the language, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not saying what you said didn't hurt me. It did hurt me and it made me feel this way, but we're going to work through this. And after the cortisol, forget counting to 10, the cortisol takes 3 to 5 hours. But if we can develop those skills, we do better.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So I like these tips. And so you mentioned the thing that you have for teens. So,
Yeah.
so can you, because obviously parenting is one of the top conflicts that couples come in to marriage counseling for, and it's one of the top challenges that face couples. So talk a little bit about your program and how you help parents with attachment with their teens.
Yeah, it's called goodenoughparent.online. Good enough parent, just one word, good enough parent. And the good enough, remember, is 3 out of 10 interactions need to be this attunement, adolescent attunement, I call it. So goodenoughparent.online. It's free. It's been fully funded by gracious people, and they just want to get it out there. So anybody can go to goodenoughparent.online and sign up, and you get 15 tips, short 10-minute tips, faith-based, and you get one a day for 15 days. And we do scientific before and after surveys, so we can show you pretty quickly where there has been movement. So far, the average is, as a result of the 15 tips, the am I a good enough parent goes up 21%. That's a win. Do I understand what's going on in my child's brain? Goes up 46%. How do I feel about my child's spiritual formation? Using some of these tips goes up about 18%. So we're seeing positive movement from frustrated and weary parents. We really build on the latest neuroscience where, this being a counselor, the teens' prefrontal cortex, where they have long-term restrictions, where they ask the question, is this a good idea? Where they worry about strategy, where they say, nope, it's probably not a good idea to smoke that. That's not developed until they're 20 for a girl or 25 for a boy. And so one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is they try to be reasonable with their children. With their teenagers, and the teenagers can't be reasonable. And they think they are, but they're not. So again, back to this, every child needs an adult who's irrationally crazy. Is through these 15 tips, we try to give parents some ideas how they can, in between the explosions, how they can begin to change the pattern that they speak to their children with. Like I said earlier, I'm your biggest fan. I buy stock in you. I think you can change the world. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving. I'll always be your mother, your father. That will never change. But by the way, what you said hurt me. And no, you can't go over to Johnny's with no parents. All of that's true. And the idea is we through this, developing this pattern of I'm your biggest fan. I love you as you are. You are good enough for me. I am here always. We want to get the explosions from here to here. It's not down to zero. So at the beginning, we basically say our ultimate goal is so that your teenager will become your best friend by the time they're 30.
Yeah. I like that. And so when I think about military families, I feel like this would be really relevant because when sort of like going back to the attachment theory, as a parent, when my kid's brain is not fully developed yet, I am how they emotionally regulate. My ability to make sense of what's going on, to be what did you call it? Irrationally
irrationally crazy about them.
That helps them learn how to regulate their emotions.
You are right. That's exactly right.
And military kids, or kids of military service members, they have so many more up and down emotional things going on. Of course, they have the regular teen crazy hormone stuff, and the brain development, but parents going to deployment and coming back.
Oh, it's got to be hard.
Moves, changing schools, losing friends.
Abandonment issues, daddy issues, mommy issues. It's got to be off the charts.
Yeah. And so thinking about using attachment, and your program covers like attachment and how to use that with your kids as a way to help them navigate those changes, I think is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, we give parents tools to identify their own attachment quadrant and their teen's attachment quadrant, and then what to do with it. But I think the best part is the tips we give on how they can, in their context, whatever their context is, change the way they're. So let me see. Teens right now, you mentioned right now, teens, well, it's not just now, but particularly now with social media, with other influences, parents are less and less the source of that trusted adult who's irrationally crazy. It's a dopamine thing, right? So it used to be if you're on a farm and you're the only person for miles, you get your dopamine hits where you can get them, and it's probably your parents. But now social media is just designed to give particularly teenagers and tweens dopamine hits, and parents are falling way, way, way behind. So that drip, drip, drip is there, and it's, ethically barren. It doesn't necessarily have the best interest of your child. It appears to be irrationally crazy about your child, at least until it's not. So parents, it's almost like we have to go into high gear to once again become that source of dopamine hits for our teens.
Yeah, this opens up so many thoughts for me, and I haven't done like a parenting specific series, but I've been playing around with the idea of doing one in the future. So I might have you back on down the road if you're interested.
I'd be honored.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm playing around with the idea. Right now I'm focused on couples. So yeah, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Do you have any last final words for the audience, or how people could find you if they wanted to?
Yeah, that's a good point. People can contact me. I'm very available. Bill at gospel-app.com. Bill at gospel-app.com. They can contact me if they have questions, particularly faith-related, but not necessarily faith-related. As I said, I think I told you in the pre-interview, we are creating a good enough parent that's scrubbed of faith. It's secular, it's agnostic. We hope to have that out for local school districts, particularly here in Colorado. Suicide ideation is in between 2010 and 2020, suicide ideation went up 62% here. So it's brutal. It's just brutal. So the school districts are just screaming. They can't get enough counselors, and so having something that they can send home to the parents, it might be feasible. So we're trying to scrub it. It'll probably be 10 tips instead of 15.
Yeah. Well, I love that you are making that for them. I will include links in the show notes with how people can contact you, and the link to the Good Enough Parent program. And whenever you have the secular one, you can send that to me too, and I'll add it to the show notes even.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Early next year.
Yeah. Great. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was lovely having you.
It was fun. Thank you so much.
As part of this special series on attachment in relationships, I created the ARE quiz. This quiz uses the Brief Accessibility, Responsiveness, and Engagement Scale, which I used in my own dissertation research, and I use with each couple when I start working with them in couples counseling. This quiz helps you and your partner know how secure your relationship is, the level of distress you're in, when you should be considering marriage counseling, and what sort of behaviors you both can work on to help promote the security of your attachment bond. Make sure to check out the show notes to download a copy of the quiz. While I am a therapist, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered therapy. And it should also not be a replacement for therapy. If you think you need a professional of any kind, you should definitely go find one. Until next time.